In 2025, I am doing something radical. I'm gonna be spending $0 on my entire wardrobe. But unlike the no-buy year that they did in 2019, this is going to be much more of a low-buy year. And if you're someone that has maybe thought about doing a no-buy or a low-buy year, but you don't want to do anything extreme, this might be exactly what you need. So grab your favorite drink and let's talk about Project Zero. So as the name suggests, the goal of Project Zero is to spend $0 on my wardrobe in 2025. And if you're someone that maybe has done a no-buy year or has thought about doing one, you already know that this is one way to achieve that goal of not spending any money on your wardrobe. But at the same time, doing a no-buy year is quite an extreme approach because it is very much all or nothing, and this is not exactly what I think I need right now. All the way back in 2019, when I did my first no-buy year, I was in a very different headspace. I was someone that couldn't resist an impulse buy, I went shopping multiple times a week, and I had hundreds of items that I didn't really wear, and I had no clue about my personal style. And so at that point, it did make sense to go on a no-buy year. And if you want to hear a bit more about the signs you might have a shopping problem, check out this video right here. And the experience of going on a no-buy year completely changed my life because it rewired my brain to change how it sees shopping and buying different things. And it helped me to curb my impulsive behavior. And if you want to hear about how it actually went and what changes I've made, check out this video right there. So it has now been 5 years since I completed my first no-buy year in 2019. And I have completely changed how I see shopping. And I'm going to be doing a separate video on what has actually changed, but I think the biggest change and shift for me has been the fact that I can now resist any sort of impulse buying, and I am much more of a mindful consumer when it comes to what I bring into my wardrobe. And it doesn't mean that I never make mistakes, as I talked about in my worst purchases of the year, but I am much better in terms of thinking about what I bring into my closet and how many items I'm buying. And so while I consider doing a no-buy year for 2025, I decided against it for two different reasons. Number one is that I'm not trying to curb any sort of extreme behavior, and so an extreme approach like a no-buy year just didn't seem appropriate. But at the same time, I also didn't want to completely restrict myself for an entire year because I know that sometimes adding one or two new pieces can refresh your style and make you feel like you have a whole new wardrobe. And so I wanted to leave this opportunity to maybe add a couple of new things to my wardrobe and experiment with my style, while at the same time not shopping to the extremes. And so that sort of moderation of a low buy year is what I was after. But you might be wondering, why am I actually trying to spend $0 on my wardrobe? And there are actually two different reasons, and both are quite personal to me, so it feels a little bit vulnerable to share, but I've always wanted this channel to be a very transparent place. So let me explain. Now, the first reason is financial, and I am turning 30 in 2025, and in all honesty, financially, I am not at the same place that I thought I would be at this time. And especially when it applies to things like home ownership, I feel like in my parents' generation, people were owning their property by age 30. And even though I know that for my generation, it is still totally normal to rent, as someone who has moved home 9 or 10 times in the last 10 years, I absolutely hate moving. I hate the hustle of moving, of finding new place, and I kind of crave this stability that owning your own property can provide. And even though I may not stay in Manchester forever, I still want to have that opportunity to own a place in here that I get to call my own. But in order to be able to save for a house deposit, especially as a single person, I needed to focus on saving up in order to be able to get a loan. But the thing is that because I changed my career in the middle of my 20s and it took me a couple of years to start getting a stable salary, I am a little bit behind a lot of my peers who maybe started their career straight out of university. And because of that, my finances are still an area where I am working quite hard on. I would say that I have made really big strides in 2024 from someone who had their head buried in the sand to someone that now has a high yield savings account, a lifetime ISA that basically allows you to save for your first property. And I am in a much better place financially, but I am still someone that needs to work a lot in order to be able to save for that house deposit. And truthfully, I just want to take the money that I'm earning and maximize its potential. And because I already have a lot of clothes that I love and enjoy wearing, this just felt like a very sensible first category to try to lower my spending in. And so that is why Project Zero is happening. Now, the second reason is something I just touched upon, and that is the fact that I already have a lot of clothes to wear. So ever since my color analysis back in 2023, I have actually spent a lot of time and money trying to replace a lot of my less suitable clothes into clothes that genuinely fit me really well, are in a suitable color, and also represent something about my style. And since then, I have amassed quite a lot of clothes that I genuinely enjoy, and I want to make good use of them. And this may sound a little bit crazy, but there may be about 10 items that I am super excited about. Every time I bring them out of storage, I'm excited to style them or to show them in videos. But I don't have this connection with a really large portion of my wardrobe. And that is not because they're bad items, but it is because I have never actually given them enough of a try and enough of a chance to get worn. And so the word of the year for 2025 for me is enjoyment. And that is going to apply to every single area of my life. So for example, when it comes to books, I am planning to read all of the books on my bookshelf and actually enjoy them. Same thing with my makeup. As you can see, I'm wearing eyeshadows because I want to actually make a little bit more use of the items that I actually have. And I'm going to take the exact same approach of enjoying the clothes that I have bought, enjoying the items that I have, and wearing them. And so Project Zero is super relevant because it's going to give me that space to actually experiment with my clothes and refine my personal style. And so combining that financial reason with the more emotional reason is what actually led me to Project Zero. But you might be wondering, how is this actually going to work in a practical sense? How am I actually planning to bring any new items that I mentioned without spending any money? So let me share the rules that I have devised for myself. So if you have already done a wardrobe declutter, you might have a sale pile. And if you've ever tried to sell clothes, you know that it is quite a tedious process and sales don't really happen instantaneously. And so even though I have been selling my clothes for the past 6 years and I know perfectly well how to sell clothes, I have to admit that in 2024, I didn't prioritize this and I really procrastinated on doing it. And because of that, I have a sales pile of about 30 items. And so in 2025, I am actually going to start with a $0 shopping budget. And so all of the money that I'm going to add to my shopping pot is going to come from selling my existing clothes. That can be those items in my sell pile. And so that's going to give me that motivation to actually list them and sell them properly. And I'm also going to allow myself to sell any of the items that are in my existing closet. But I realized throughout the year that maybe I don't enjoy wearing nearly as much as I used to. And I'm prepared for that to happen in 2025. Now, in terms of what I am allowing myself to buy, I thought about whether I should only shop secondhand, but I have to admit that I have made a couple of new purchases in 2024 and they turned out to be very successful. And so I'm not going to restrict myself to just pre-loved items. I'm going to allow myself to use my shopping pot on whatever item I need. However, there's going to be a little caveat, and that is that I need to have the money already in my shopping pot before I buy anything. And so, for example, if I have $0 in a certain moment, there is no point of me going shopping or even browsing because I'm not going to be able to bring anything in. And if, let's say, I like a jumper that is 50 pounds, but I only have 30 pounds in my shopping pot, I'm not allowing myself to say something like, well, I'll buy it now, and then maybe in a month I'll sell something for 20 pounds and add it to my shopping pot. No, I'm not doing that. Basically, if I don't have the money for it, I am not buying it. And I think for me, this is going to be a huge motivator to continue listing things, refreshing them, and making sales because I am not stealing from my future self. And I think this is a great way for me to be a lot more sustainable and supporting the circularity in terms of my shopping. Because I do donate clothes sometimes, but my first way is actually to try and sell them because I know that a huge portion of items that are donated never end up being sold, and so they still end up in a landfill. And so I know that whenever I'm selling an item, there is a higher chance that this is actually going to be used by someone because they spend their own money on trying to acquire it. And so in that way, it is extending the longevity of an item and expanding its life cycle. Now, are there any exceptions to my rules and how is that going to work? I have decided that there are 3 categories of exceptions that I'm going to allow myself, and that is because they perfectly align with the goal of spending $0. So number 1 is going to be gifts. We have my birthday coming in May and obviously the Christmas holiday later in the year, and so on those occasions I might get certain gifts, and those might be shoes or clothes or anything else that I might want. And so if that happens to be the case, I am going to accept the gift because it is not my money that I'm spending, and I'm going to be very grateful for whoever is bringing me that gift. The second thing may or may not happen in 2025, and that is actually brand collaborations and accepting items from certain brands. Now, I want to be very, very honest with you that even if my channel is relatively small still, I have already got about 10 clothes and shoes and accessories brands that have reached out to me and offered to send me different items in exchange for a dedicated video, a haul, or a review. And so far, I have said no to all of those brands because I just didn't agree with their ethos, their sustainability, or the quality of their items. Because whenever I was looking, for example, in their clothes and I saw that they're made of polyester and acrylic and a lot of those man-made fabrics, I just couldn't justify showing that to my audience because it is not something that I would personally buy myself. And the same thing with jewelry. If I couldn't necessarily verify the origin of the materials that they were using and they had very iffy sustainability policy, I just didn't partner with that brand. And so I've not actually shown you any items because so far there hasn't been a brand that I can confidently stand behind and recommend to you. And your trust as my audience means everything to me. And so the only way that I'm going to accept any items in 2025 and beyond is going to be from brands that I can confidently stand behind, and these are actually things that I would confidently buy and use myself. And so because I am fortunate enough that I don't depend on brand collaborations for my income and to pay my bills, I can confidently say no and only bring collaborations that are truly aligned. And so that's why I'm saying that this may or may not happen in 2025, but if it does happen, you would know that it is genuinely from a place where I love the brand and the items. And the final way that I'm also going to align with my goal of spending $0 is actually by participating in clothing swaps and no-buy groups. Now, I have to be honest, this is not an area where I have a lot of experience in, but at the same time, if it happens that, for example, my jeans break and I really need a pair of jeans, or I need a specific windbreaker or a jacket, but I don't necessarily have the money to buy that item at the moment, this is when I'm going to look into those no-buy groups and swaps and maybe try to acquire the item in that way without spending money. But one thing I am not allowing myself is just to browse those groups and get items just because they're free, because the whole point of Project Zero is to actually enjoy my existing wardrobe and make use of what I already have. And so I'm not planning to bring in new items for the sake of having new items. I already have enough. And so while these are the three slightly unconventional ways that I'm going to allow exceptions, they're still allowing me to spend $0. But are there any actual categories where I'm going to spend money on my wardrobe? This is actually something that I really had to stop and think about. I went back to my original video that I did on my no-buy year, and I reminded myself of how I thought about makeup, because this was one of the categories back then where I used to have multiples and spend a lot of money. And so back then, my rule was that I was not allowed to buy any eyeshadows or lipsticks because I had a lot of that and I wanted to make use of the items and use them up. But at the same time, if I run out of my foundation or eyebrow pencil, I was allowed to buy a replacement. And that is because in those categories, I only had one item that I used. And so when I run out of it, rather than going without, I was allowing myself to simply replace it. And so using the same approach, I asked myself if there are any items in my wardrobe that I genuinely have only one of, and I came up with two things that I might need to replace in 2025. And so the first thing is actually my pair of running trainers, and that is because I've had those ones for about 2.5 years, and literally they're on their deathbed. They have a lot of snags, and basically they would need replacing in the next couple of months. The other thing that is also on its last leg is actually my beige strapless bra. And this is something that I genuinely use throughout the year, both in the summer where I have a lot of strapless tops, but even in the winter because I do wear a lot of lightly colored white jumpers and also some mesh tops, and I do need something that is flesh colored. And so for me, both of those items are an absolute essential. And so when those items are past their shelf life, I'm going to allow myself to replace them. And I have set aside a budget of £100 that is going to be separate from my shopping pot. And I think that this is quite a realistic budget because I believe that I can find similar sneakers for about £60 to £70 and a bra for about £30 to £40. And so I should be able to fit within that budget. Now, I can't think of anything else where I genuinely have only one item, because even things like socks and pants and tights, I have multiples of, and so I will be able to use other items if one of them breaks. But if something comes to mind where, for example, I break my favorite walking shoes or anything like that, and I don't have a replacement, I might consider adding to that, but it's going to be very much on an as needed basis. And so I'm really curious, what are your thoughts about Project Zero? Is this something that you have considered doing, or maybe you want to join me, which would be super, super exciting? Well, let me know in the comments. And if you need any more fresh ideas about New Year's style goals and resolutions, check out this video where I'm going to share the 10 ones I'm using for 2025. I'll see you there.